You'll be handling the entire reconciliation workflow going forward. He told me I was now fully responsible for the entire reconciliation process. That's what he said. No preamble, no warning, just that. Like he was handing me a memo about the new coffee filters. He delivered the news without any introduction or heads up, as casually as if he were discussing a new office supply. I was still chewing a bite of bland cafeteria lasagna when the words dropped out of Trent's mouth like loose change from a ripped suit pocket. The new VP. Hair to geld, shoes too shiny, and a PowerPoint addiction that could qualify for rehab. The new vice president, Trent with his overly gelled hair, shiny shoes, and a severe PowerPoint obsession, announced this as I was eating my unappealing cafeteria lasagna, his words spilling out like coins from a torn pocket. 10 minutes into the all-hands cost optimization meeting when he announced it, like my entire team had been a clerical error, he was finally correcting. The announcement came just 10 minutes into our company-wide meeting about as if my entire team had been a mistake. He was finally getting around to fixing. We're sunsetting the reconciliation unit, but Marla here's got 15 years of institutional knowledge, he said, gesturing to me like I was a feature of the building. He declared that the reconciliation unit would be eliminated, then gestured to me as though I were a permanent fixture of the building, saying that I had 15 years of invaluable company knowledge. She's a rock star, a real team player. Rock star. I haven't taken a full lunch break since Obama's first term, but sure. Let's go with rock star. He called me a rock star and a real team player. A rock star? I haven't had a proper lunch break since Obama's first term, but I accepted the label. Across the room, Brenda's hands stopped mid-highlight over her audit binder. Julian, my newest hire, who still believed in things like performance reviews, went ghost white. Brenda, across the room, froze with her highlighter still on her audit binder. Julian, my most recent hire, who was still naive enough to believe in performance reviews, turned pale. No one spoke. They didn't have to. We all knew what it meant. They were gone, effective immediately. A silence fell. We didn't need words. We all understood the team was being let go, effective immediately. And I was the poor bastard inheriting their workloads. No raise, no bonus, just a thank you for your flexibility. Trent beamed like he'd handed me a gift card, not a burning building. I was the unfortunate person left to handle all their work, with no raise or bonus, just a vague thank you for my flexibility. Trent smiled as if he had given me a gift, not a disaster to manage. I smiled. CUZ, here's the thing. I knew right then what I was going to do. I smiled because in that moment, I knew exactly what my plan would be. I'd been used before, passed over, piled on, painted over, but this time I was going to leave a crater I had been taken advantage of, overlooked, and buried in work before. But this time, I was going to make an unforgettable impact. And if this story hits a nerve, if you've ever been the duct tape holding chaos together while they handed out balloons to the arsonists, do me one favor. Hit that subscribe button. I'm gunning for my first 1OK subscribers, and every click is a middle finger to every Trent out there. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever had to hold a chaotic situation together while others who caused the problems were rewarded, please do one thing for me. Subscribe. I'm working toward 10,000 subscribers, and each one is a small act of defiance against people like Trent. Anyway, back in the meeting, Trent moved on. Something about Q4 projections. I didn't hear a damn word of it. I was too busy watching his mouth move while mentally packing my digital go bag. Trent then moved on to discussing fourth quarter projections. I didn't listen to a single word. Instead, I watched his mouth move while I mentally prepared to gather all my important digital files. You know that quiet moment in a heist movie when the hacker's already in the system and the guards don't know they've been robbed? That was me. I was already archiving, already cataloging. I was like a hacker in a heist, movie already inside the system, while the guards remained unaware. I was already saving and organizing my digital records. They thought they were saving money. They were really doing was detonating the only person who knew how the money worked. They believed they were cutting costs, but in reality, they were removing the only person who truly understood the financial systems. I had every audit report from the last 10 years, custom templates, macros, red flag protocols, vendor history, footnotes, buried deeper than Jimmy Hoffa. I had all the audit reports from the past decade, including custom templates, macros, red flag protocols, and vendor histories with details more deeply hidden than Jimmy Hoffa. My team didn't just balance books. We played financial triage on a quarterly basis to make sure these clowns didn't get torched by the IRS or faceplant during investor reviews. My team didn't just balance accounts. Every quarter, we performed financial damage control to prevent our company's leadership from being burned by the IRS or humiliated during investor meetings. Now, I was alone with everything. Kept smiling. Trent kept talking. The room stayed frozen. In that surreal, too quiet office tension, the kind that buzzes behind your teeth like an oncoming migraine. Now, I was the sole person responsible for everything. I kept smiling while Trent continued to talk. The room was unnaturally quiet, filled with a tension that felt like the start of a migraine. He wrapped the meeting with a nauseating "let's keep pushing forward" and left, like he just awarded me a trophy. I stood there a moment longer, watching the Zoom window close, the echo of false praise still ringing in my ears. He concluded the meeting with a sickly sweet "let's keep pushing forward" and left as if he had given me an award. I stayed there for a moment, watching the Zoom window close, the empty praise still echoing in my mind. Then I opened a new document. I titled it "For When They Panic." I then created a new document and named it "For When They Panicked." Ara showed up Friday morning like nothing had happened. Cardigan pressed, hair twisted up in the same nonsense bun she'd worn since 2009. And a travel mug that said #1. Mom. Even though her kids were grown and living in different time zones, Arla arrived on Friday morning as if everything were normal. Her cardigan was ironed. Her hair was in the same practical bun she had worn for years, and she carried a travel mug that said #1, Mom, even though her children were adults living far away. She walked past the glassed-in offices where managers pretended not to notice the carnage they greenlit the day before. No one made eye contact. No one dared. She walked past offices where the managers deliberately avoided looking at the mess they had created the day before. No one would make eye contact with her. Her desk looked the same. Something fundamental had changed. She booted up her computer, opened the Master Reconciliation Workbook, and hit save as, not to the shared drive, not to the finance folder. She named it Final Binder Personal Copy XLSX and tucked it deep into a password-locked folder buried in a flash drive she kept under a post-it in her drawer labeled Holiday Recipes. Her desk looked unchanged, but a crucial shift had occurred. She turned on her computer, opened the main reconciliation file, and saved a new copy. Instead of saving it to the shared company drive, she named it Final Binder Personal Copy XLSX and hid it in a password-protected folder on a flash drive, which she kept in her desk drawer under a sticky note labeled Holiday Recipes. Trent could walk in with a subpoena, and he'd still be searching by Labor Day. Arla spent the morning documenting everything, every invoice format, every reconciliation cycle, vendor-specific quirks, who to call when the Oracle system hiccuped and claimed the same $18,000 twice. Even if Trent came in with a subpoena, he wouldn't find it for months. That morning, Arla documented every detail, invoice formats, reconciliation cycles, specific vendor issues, and who to contact when the Oracle system erroneously duplicated an $80,000 charge. She wrote like she was preparing for the rapture and nobody else had a map. She did not tell anyone they hadn't earned the blueprint. She documented everything as if she were creating the only guide to survive a disaster. She kept the information to herself because she felt no one else deserved access to this crucial blueprint. By lunch, she had 37 pages of bullet proofs peppered with footnotes like, "Don't trust Q, 2 numbers from 2021. The VP manually altered them for optics and red flag. Vendor hash 1643 always submits padded invoices during audit weeks. Auditors flagged this 3 times. CFO ignored little landmines she knew the auditors loved to trip over. By lunchtime, she had a 37-page document filled with indisputable facts, including notes like, "Don't trust Q2 numbers from 2021. The VP manually changed them for show, and vendor hash 1643 always submits inflated invoices during audit." Auditors have flagged this 3 times, but the CFO ignored it. These were small issues she knew auditors would be eager to find. Normally she'd correct them quietly, fix the books, protect the company, but she was done being the invisible cleanup crew. She would normally have discreetly corrected these issues to protect the company, but she was finished being the unseen person who fixed everyone's mistakes. In meetings, she smiled, nodded, wrote things like, "I'll look into it and thanks for the update." Even when what she meant was, "You absolute buffoon. You just approved a $42,000 mistake with your initials on it." During meetings, she would smile, nod, and make notes like, "I'll check on it and thanks for the update," even though she was thinking, "You complete fool. You just personally approved a $42,000 mistake." Trent popped into one of those Friday stand-ups like he was hosting a bake sale. "Hey, Mara, just wanted to check in. How's the transition going? Need anything?" Trent appeared at a Friday meeting with the casual demeanor of a bake sale host. "Hey, Mara," he said, "just wanted to check in. How's the transition going? Do you need anything?" She could have said, "Yes, I need you to go back to whatever marketing think tank spawned you." She didn't. Instead, she gave him the same deadied smile she used for malfunctioning printers and said, "All good. I'm keeping things steady." She could have told him to go back to the marketing firm that created him, but she didn't. Instead, she gave him the same blank smile she reserved for broken office equipment and replied, "Everything's fine. I'm keeping things stable." He nodded like a golden retriever who'd been told he was a good boy. "That's what I like to hear." She watched him walk away and thought about how easily people like him dismissed the groundwork as background noise. The reconciliation team had been the skeleton of this operation, unseen, taken for granted. "God help you if it snapped." He nodded with the satisfaction of a dog being praised. "That's what I like to hear," he said. As he walked away, she reflected on how people like him easily ignore the foundational work that makes everything else possible. Her team had been the unseen and unappreciated core of the company's operations, and she knew the consequences if that core were to fail. By Monday, Mara had started a second document. This one was titled "Questions Auditors Usually Ask Dos Ex." And every time someone forgot to loop her into a vendor adjustment or skipped a recon protocol, because we've always done it that way, she logged it, not to fix it, to remember. She began practicing silence like it was a weapon. By Monday, Mara had created a second document called "Questions Auditors Usually Ask." She began to use silence as a tool, logging every time someone failed to include her in a vendor adjustment or skipped a standard procedure. She didn't log it to fix the problem, but to remember it. She was learning to use her silence as a weapon. Nod, nod. Through meetings, while mentally counting the unfiled reports that were supposed to be uploaded weekly, she stopped reminding people, stopped saving them from themselves. It didn't take long to notice no one else had any idea what her team actually did. Not the cadence, not the tools, not even where the reports lived. She would nod in meetings while mentally tallying the reports that were not filed. She stopped reminding people and stopped rescuing them from their own errors. She quickly realized that no one else had any idea what her team did, not the process, the tools, or even the location of the files. Half the files were on her local machine because Brenda didn't trust cloud storage, and the other half required login credentials that expired monthly. No one even knew the password schema. She'd been the Phalef, the firewall, and now she was quietly, meticulously shutting herself off. Half of the files were on her computer because Brenda didn't trust cloud storage, and the other half needed login credentials that changed every month with a password system no one else understood. She had been the company's safeguard and firewall, and now she was systematically and silently disconnecting herself. Mara left the office at 5:01 that evening. Her private audit binder zipped up on a flash drive in her purse. She passed Trent in the hallway. He smiled again. She smiled back. But this time, it wasn't fake. It was surgical. That evening, Mara left the office at 5:01 with her personal audit file secured on a flash drive in her bag. She passed Trent in the hallway. He smiled at her, and she smiled back. But this time, her smile was not a pretense. It was precise and deliberate. Mara had never liked the phrase quiet quitting. Sounded like something the interns posted on TikTok while sipping $7 coffee and filming day in the life reels. What she was doing wasn't quiet. It was symphonic. Mara had always disliked the term quiet quitting, which she associated with INTERNs creating TikTok videos about their workdays while drinking expensive coffee. What she was doing was not quiet at all. It was a complex and coordinated operation. It started with her calendar. The hours she used to spend checking team output, scrubbing ledger imports, and cleaning up after Trent's spreadsheet tantrums. Those became external stakeholder calls and vendor syncs. That was her code. In reality, she was fielding interviews, Zoom calls during lunch breaks in her car, her blazer slung over her usual cardigan, dashboard fan blowing just enough to keep her from melting under the Ohio sun. Her plan began with her calendar, the time she used to spend reviewing her team's work, fixing financial records, and cleaning up Trent's spreadsheet errors was now scheduled as external stakeholder calls and vendor syncs. This was her code for taking job interviews over Zoom during her lunch breaks in her car, with her blazer draped over her cardigan and the fan blowing to combat the heat. Tell us about a time you resolved a high-press financial oversight under tight deadlines. One recruiter asked, smiling like this was a game show. Mara grinned back. Just last quarter, our controller approved a duplicate payout to a vendor who was already flagged for overbilling. They caught it before the check cleared. No one above me even noticed. A recruiter, with a smile of a game show host, asked her to describe a time you corrected a major financial mistake under pressure. Mara smiled back and replied, just last quarter, our controller authorized a duplicate payment to a vendor who had already been flagged for overcharging. I caught the error before the check cleared, and no one in a senior position even noticed it had happened. They nodded like she'd solved world hunger. Inside, Mara felt nothing. Not pride, not joy, just the cold, methodical relief of someone who knows the fire escape is right where it should be. They nodded in approval as if she had solved a global crisis. Inside, Mara felt no pride or joy, just a calm, deliberate sense of relief, like someone who knows the fire escape is exactly where it should be. Back at the office, she began to clean up. Not for them, for herself. Old Slack threads gone. Personal notes on the shared drive, long-winded email chains with Brenda about shady vendor activity and quarterly adjustment anomalies, archived to a personal Gmail, then scrubbed from the company servers. She ghosted herself 1 kilib at a time. Back at work, she began erasing her digital footprint, not for the company's benefit, but for her own. Old Slack conversations were gone. Personal notes on the shared drive were deleted. Long email chains with Brenda about questionable vendor activity were archived to a personal Gmail account and then permanently removed from the company's servers. She was systematically disappearing herself from the company's records. The thing about being essentious, people assume you'll always be there. So no one noticed the trail going cold. No one asked why the Mara folder was suddenly half its size or why all those macros they depended on now, said Hashref, watched them flail politely. When you're indispensable, people assume you'll always be there. Because of this, no one noticed that her digital trail was fading. No one questioned why her main folder was suddenly half the size it used to be or why the macros they relied on were now showing an error. She watched their polite confusion from a distance. Then HR sent the email subject knowledge transferred planning requests for discussion. She stared at it for a full 30 seconds. HR had that uniquely soulless tone, like they were asking if you could train your replacement with the same cheer as baking brownies for potluck. Then an email from Human Resources arrived with the subject line, Knowledge Transfer Planning Request for Discussion. She looked at it for half a minute. The tone of HR correspondence felt impersonal, as if they were asking her to train her replacement with the same casualness as asking her to bring brownies to a potluck. Mara clicked mark as unread. 2 days later, they followed up. Just checking to see if you saw our last message. Please let us know a good time to meet. She flagged it. Let it rot. If they wanted knowledge transfer, they could hire a psychic or maybe try divining the process from the crumbs left behind in her draft folders. Mara marked the email as unread. 2 days later, a follow-up email appeared. She flagged it and left it to be ignored. She decided that if they wanted her expertise, they could hire a psychic or try to reconstruct her processes from the digital remnants in her draft folders every night now. She walked out of the building exactly at 5 p.m., not 5:01, not 5:06 after answering just one more question from the CFO. 5 o'clock dead on, and every time she passed that "we're all in this together" poster in the hallway wanted to staple her resignation letter to it just for the poetry. From then on, she left the building precisely at 5 p.m. She wouldn't stay a minute later to answer a question from the CFO. Every time she walked by the "we're all in this together" poster, she felt an urge to attach her resignation letter to it for the dramatic effect. On Thursday, she walked into a meeting where Trent was showcasing a new efficiency matrix he got from a leadership podcast. He stood in front of a slide that said, "We rise by lifting others in Comic Sans." Mara, you've been with us a long time. You embody so much of our core DNA. He beamed. She smiled. Thank you, Trent. On Thursday, she attended a meeting where Trent presented a new efficiency matrix he'd learned about on a leadership podcast. He stood in front of a slide that read, "We rise by lifting others" in Comic Sans font. "Mara," he said, smiling, "you've been with us for a long time and you represent so much of who we are." She smiled back and said, "Thank you, Trent." He went on about integration, synergy, elasticity, whatever MBA salad he'd marinated in that week. Meanwhile, she mentally accepted the offer that hit her inbox that morning. Better title, more money, a boss who used like a verb and not a threat. He continued to speak in vague business jargon. Meanwhile, Mara had already mentally accepted the job offer she had received that morning, which came with a better job title, more pay, and a manager who used the word "like" as a verb, not a threat. The world around her kept spinning its shallow corporate theater, but Mara had already left the building. All that was left was her shadow, and even that was starting to fade. The corporate drama continued around her, but Mara was already gone. The only thing left of her was her present, and even that was beginning to fade. It was a Tuesday morning when the CFO stopped by her desk with a coffee-stained mug that read, "I excel at Excel," in a casual tone that didn't match the stakes of the conversation. "Hey, Mara, just touching base, audit season's creeping up, everything on track." One Tuesday morning, the CFO stopped by her desk holding a coffee-stained mug that said, "I excel at Excel," with a relaxed tone that was completely at odds with the serious nature of the situation. He asked, "Hey, Mara, just checking in. Audit season is coming up. Is everything on schedule? She didn't even look up from her screen. Absolutely. He nodded, sipped his coffee like it didn't taste like printer ink and denial. Then he wandered off, confident that the woman who'd quietly saved his ass year after year would do it again. She didn't even look up from her monitor.
Absolutely.
She said. He nodded, sipped his coffee, which seemed to taste of printer ink and denial, then wandered off, convinced that the woman who had quietly saved him from trouble year after year would do it again. Just like always, except not this time because Mara had already accepted a new offer. Salary bump, fewer hours, an actual assistant, a boss who started emails with hi instead of per my last request. She was gone, not metaphorically, not emotionally, contractually, unlike all the other times she was not going to be there. Mara had already accepted a new job with a higher salary, shorter hours, a real assistant, and a boss who began emails with hi instead of, as per my last request. She wasn't just emotionally or mentally checked out. Her new contract meant she was legally gone. Her last day was exactly 2 days before the audit. TikTok back on her screen. Central audit folder looked fine, neat, organized.com, like a pond right before it's poisoned. But that folder was a ghost. She hadn't updated the reconciliation. Logs in over 3 weeks. The vendor summaries 6 months out of date. And the financial controls checklist, the one auditors usually asked for first, was filled with placeholder text she'd written in a fit of sarcasm. Definitely not where the fraud. Live is law. File alone was worth her entire severance package in karmic value. Her last day was set for 2 days before the audit. The main audit folder on her screen appeared well organized and peaceful, but it was nothing more than a facade. She hadn't updated the reconciliation logs in over 3 weeks. The vendor summaries were 6 months out of date, and the financial controls checklist, the one auditors typically requested first, was filled with sarcastic placeholder text she had written. The value of this single file alone was a fitting reward for her, an act of karmic justice. Of course, her private version was flawless, updated nightly, stored on a fireproof SSD in her bag, labeled not your audit V2. She spent her afternoons watching the company float deeper into the fog, completely unaware their compass had already walked out the door in orthopedic flats and a cardigan with loose buttons. Her personal version of the audit file was, of course, perfect. She updated it every night and kept it on a fireproof hard drive in her bag, labeled not your audit V2. She spent her afternoons watching the company lose its way, completely unaware that the person who guided them had already walked out the door. They had no idea the fire was already smoldering beneath them, just hadn't smelled the smoke yet. And Mara, she stood there like a forest spirit, watching it all from a distance, calmly holding a box of. They were completely oblivious. A problem was already building, but they hadn't yet noticed the signs. Mara, meanwhile, observed everything from a distance, as calm as a forest spirit, holding a box of There was a strange beauty in it, the kind you feel right before a thunderstorm. That pregnant silence when the world doesn't know it's seconds from being torn wide open. Trent breezed by later that day. Hey, Mara, mind if I add you to a client call Thursday about their year-end questions? Won't be available then. she said without blinking. There was a peculiar beauty in the situation, the kind of stillness that precedes a powerful storm. Later that day, Trent casually walked by and asked, "Hey, Mara, can I add you to a client call on Thursday to discuss their year-end questions?" Without hesitating, she said, "I won't be available then." Oh, he tilted his head like a confused pug. "I have prior commitments." He laughed awkwardly. "Busy season, huh? Appreciate you holding the fort." He tilted his head like a confused pug. "I have prior commitments," she said. He laughed awkwardly, saying, "Busy season, huh? I appreciate you holding things down." And still, he didn't ask, didn't notice, didn't add, didn't. No, that was the thrill of it. She could have screamed, "I'm leaving in 11 days," into the break room microwave, and no one would have noticed unless it affected the coffee supply. Could have tattooed her resignation on Trent's forehead, and he'd still ask if she could hop on just one more day to scrub next week. And still, he didn't ask. He didn't notice. He didn't know that was the most satisfying part. She could have screamed, "I'm leaving in 11 days," into the break room microwave, and no one would have noticed unless it affected the coffee supply. She could have tattooed her resignation on Trent's forehead, and he would still ask if she could stay to handle one more task. The documents remained untouched, the reports untouched, the trust unshaken. That night, as she zipped up her bag and shut down her machine, she paused to look at the dry erase board across the hall. Someone had drawn a crude rocket ship and written, "Auditors incoming. Let's blast off." She smiled, shut off the lights, and walked out, owing the countdown had already begun, and they were heading for a launch with no navigation, no coordinates, and no Mara. Just a smiling VP, a clueless CFO, and a central folder full of fiction. The documents remained untouched, the reports were ignored, and their trust remained firm. That night, as she packed her bag and shut down her computer, she paused to look at a dry erase board across the hall. Someone had drawn a crude rocket ship and written, "Auditors incoming. Let's blast off." She smiled, turned off the lights, and walked out, knowing the countdown had already started and they were about to launch without a map, without a plan, and without her. All they had was a smiling VP, a clueless CFO, and a central folder filled with lies. Mara timed it down to the hour. 2 weeks and 2 days before the audit, she drafted the email. No dramatic subject line, no teary manifesto, just notice of resignation, Mara Dorsey. 1 paragraph. Effective 2 weeks from today. Thank you for the opportunity, etc., etc. Signed with the kind of clinical precision usually reserved for surgery or war. Mara timed her actions precisely 2 weeks and 2 days before the audit. She drafted her resignation email. The subject line was not dramatic, and the body was not emotional. It simply read Notice of Resignation, Mara Dorsey. The single paragraph stated her last day was 2 weeks from that date, thanked them for the opportunity, and was signed with a detached precision typically reserved for surgery or military strategy. She clicked send at 9:03 a.m. By 9:09, the building was whispering, not loud, not frantic, just the soft, incredulous buzz that floats through cubicle farms like pollen. Mara's leaving. Is that even allowed? What are we going to do about the audit? By 9:15, HR had her in a windowless room, blinking like they'd seen a ghost. They offered her a paper cup of water. She declined. We were surprised. The HR rep stammered. Her badge said Cynthia People and Culture, which always struck Mara as funny, as if a name tag could fix culture. She clicked send at 9:03 a.m. By 9:09, the office was filled with quiet murmurs of surprise. Mara's leaving? Is that even allowed? What are we going to do about the audit? By 9:15, HR had her in a windowless room, looking as if they had seen a ghost. They offered her a paper cup of water, which she refused. We were ... surprised. The HR representative stammered. Her badge read Cynthia, People, and Culture, a name tag that Mara found ironic, as if a name tag could solve a broken company culture. Well, Marla said gently, you did lay off my entire team and triple my workload with no additional compensation. Eventually, that sort of math adds up. Cynthia shifted uncomfortably. We're hoping you could help us with a knowledge transfer plan, before the audit. Mara gave the kind of smile you use at funerals. I'll do what I can, Mara said gently. Well, you laid off my entire team and tripled my workload without any extra pay. Eventually, that equation doesn't work out. Cynthia shifted awkwardly. We were hoping you could help us with a knowledge transfer plan before the audit. Mara gave a sympathetic smile. I'll do what I can, she replied. That night, she began compiling the training materials, not the current reconciliation flow, not the updated vendor dispute logs or the master audit checklist with all the embedded formulas and risk flags. No, she dug into the archives and pulled out reports from 2 years ago, templates that had been deprecated, tools the auditors no longer asked about, macros that broke after system update. She packaged it all in a neat little PowerPoint titled Reconciliation Overview Historical Context. It had charts. It had clip art. It had zero relevance. That night, she began putting together training materials, but instead of providing the current reconciliation process or the updated vendor dispute logs, she went into the archives and pulled out 2-year-old reports, outdated templates, and broken macros. She put it all into a PowerPoint presentation titled Reconciliation Overview Historical Context. The presentation had charts and clip art, but it was completely irrelevant to the current situation. She delivered it on day 3 of her notice period to the interim analyst, a 26-year-old MBA with more ambition than sense, who smiled earnestly and nodded as she explained why vendor classification codes were important in 2021. On day 3 of her notice period, she gave the presentation to the interim analyst, a 26-year-old with an MBA who had more ambition than sense. He smiled earnestly and nodded as she explained why vendor classification codes were important in 2021. Got it, he said, highlighting bullet points like he was preparing for the Mara nodded back. You're a quick study. You'll do fine. The VP, Trent, called her into his office later that day. He looked like someone had canceled his TED Talk. Mara, he began, putting on his best concern, but still your leader voice. I have to admit, I'm disappointed. He had high hopes for you? She blinked. You mean after firing my team and burying me under their workload? He sighed. We were leaning into your strengths. You've always been a stabilizing force. I thought you were committed. She leaned forward slightly, tone perfectly measured. I was committed for 15 years. Then you decided I was disposable. He opened his mouth, but whatever he was about to say shriveled up and died. Mara stood, adjusted her cardigan like armor, said, I'm happy to assist in the transition. I've provided training, documentation, and outlined historical processes. He didn't catch the emphasis. No one ever did until it was too late, he said. Got it? And highlighted the bullet points as if he were studying for a test. Mara nodded back. You're a fast learner, she said. You'll be fine. Later that day, Trent called her into his office, looking as if his TED Talk had been canceled. Mara, he began, putting on his most concerned leader-like voice, I have to admit, I'm disappointed. I had such high hopes for you. She blinked. You mean after firing my team and burying me under their workload? He sighed. We were leveraging your strengths. You've always been a stabilizing force. I thought you were committed. She leaned forward slightly, her voice perfectly controlled. I was committed for 15 years. Then you decided I was disposable. He opened his mouth to speak, but whatever he was going to say withered and died. Mara stood up, adjusted her cardigan like a piece of armor, and said, I'm happy to help with the transition. I've provided training, documentation, and outlined historical processes. He didn't notice the emphasis on historical. No one ever did until it was too late. By Friday, her calendar was a graveyard of vague meeting titles. Sync, touchpoint, strategy, review. She attended them all, nodded when necessary, and watched them circle the drain in real time. Each time, someone asked a specific question, where the vendor log thresholds lived, or how to reconcile the intercom transactions for Q3, she tilted her head, paused, and said, H, that would have been Brenda's territory, right? They'd mutter, making notes like Brenda might materialize out of a fog with a USB stick and salvation. Mara had never felt lighter. She slept better, drank her coffee slower. She even started parking in the visitor lot out of spite, daring someone to say something. At night, she rehearsed what she'd say on her final day. Something gracious, but sharp. A line that would echo in the building long after she was gone. But that was still 9 days away. Plenty of time left to watch the floorboards creak under their weight, to let the fire spread quietly behind the walls, to smile, offer empty guidance, and walk them lovingly toward the cliff. By Friday, her calendar was filled with vague meeting titles like Sync, Touchpoint, Strategy, and Review. She attended them all, nodded when needed, and watched them slowly fall apart. Each time, someone asked a specific question like where the vendor log thresholds were or how to reconcile third-quarter intercompany transactions, she tilted her head, paused, and said that would have been Brenda's responsibility, wouldn't it? They would mutter and take notes as if Brenda might magically appear with a USB drive and save them. Mara had never felt so light. She slept better, drank her coffee more slowly. She even started parking in the visitor lot out of spite, daring someone to confront her. At night, She practiced what she would say on her last day, a line that was both polite and sharp, a phrase that would linger in the building long after she left. But that day was still 9 days away. She had plenty of time to watch their foundation crack, to let the fire quietly spread, to smile, provide useless advice, and lovingly guide them toward the edge of a cliff. By the start of her final week, the office smelled like panic, burnt coffee, cheap printer, toner, the collective flop sweat of people realizing they trusted the wrong person to stay. Monday's audit prep meeting was called for 9 a.m. sharp. Trent insisted on donuts. Mara arrived at 8:57 with a fresh notepad, a pen that didn't work, and a facial expression so neutral it could have passed for Buddhist enlightenment. She took a seat near the door. The conference room was packed. The intern, Derek, brought a laptop that wouldn't connect to the projector. Cynthia from HR hovered like someone waiting for a smoke alarm to go off. The interim analyst, what was his name? Greg had printed out 3-month-old reconciliation logs and highlighted them in pink for reasons unknown to God or finance. By her final week, the office was filled with the scent of panic, burnt coffee, and cheap printer toner, the collective anxiety of people realizing they had misplaced their trust. The audit prep meeting on Monday was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp, and Trent had insisted on donuts. Mara arrived at 8:57 a.m. with a fresh notepad, a pen that didn't work, and a completely neutral expression. She sat near the door in the packed conference room. Derek, the intern, brought a laptop that wouldn't connect to the projector. Cynthia from HR hovered nervously. The interim analyst, Greg, had printed 3-month-old reconciliation logs and highlighted them in pink for reasons that made no sense to anyone. Trent clapped his hands. All right, team. Let's get aligned. Nobody was aligned. Mara, he said cheerfully, like they were co-hosting a podcast. Can you walk us through the reconciliation file? She tilted her head with the slow grace of a church bell. Which one? He blinked. The Q4 master. She smiled faintly. I didn't upload that version to the drive. I kept it local for data integrity, since version control became a problem last quarter. Someone actually gasped. She didn't turn to see who. Trent tried to laugh. Okay, well, let's just use what's there. There was a patchwork of broken links, old template, a spreadsheet that still had Julian's name on it, despite Julian being laid off 5 weeks ago and currently freelancing in Colorado. The screen lit up with chaos, formulas referencing empty cells, tabs labeled use this one, and a red warning bar across the top that read helpfully data source unavailable. Trent clapped his hands. All right, team, he said. Let's get aligned. No one was. Mara, he said cheerfully, as if they were co-hosting a podcast. Can you walk us through the reconciliation file? She tilted her head slowly. Which one? She asked. He blinked. The Q4 master. She smiled faintly. I didn't upload that version to the shared drive. I kept it on my computer for data integrity since version control became an issue last quarter. Someone gasped. Trent laughed awkwardly. Okay, well, let's just use what's there. What was it? There was a mess, a collection of broken links, old templates, and a spreadsheet that still had Julian's name on it, even though he had been laid off 5 weeks prior. The screen showed pure chaos, formulas referencing empty cells, tabs, labeled use this one, and a red warning bar that read data solsu unibide. Trent soldiered on. We can make this work, folks. We've got legacy docs. Let's pivot. Arlo watched it unfold the way you'd watch your old house burn down after moving out. A quiet awe. Not sad, not angry, just satisfied. The intern muttered, "Where's the Q3 variance log?" Someone else chimed in, "Has anyone seen?" and deleted a calendar invite for an audit prep sync. She was finished saving them. She was already halfway out the door, and they were only just realizing that their foundation was gone. Audit day arrived like a freight train filled with overdue invoices and karma. Mara arrived early, not out of loyalty, but to savor the spectacle with front row seating and an iced coffee she sipped like champagne. She wore a navy blue blouse, subtle makeup, and the detached smile of someone attending an ex's wedding. Just to confirm, the bride looks nervous. By 8:47 a.m., the auditors were in the building. 3-person team from a third-party compliance firm with clipboards, stern faces, and the emotional range of tax law. One of them even brought a suitcase that clicked open like a hitman's rifle case. Inside, laptops, flash drives, checklists printed in 8-point font. The CFO came down in a rush, sweating through his collar. "Let's make this smooth and efficient," he barked. "Everyone be responsive, be clear, and let's put our best foot forward." Trent nodded like a bobblehead in a convertible. "We've got this." They did not got this. Within the first 15 minutes, the auditors found 3 missing vendor confirmations, a duplicated purchase order, and an account labeled MySKEXP. Mara watched it unfold from her corner desk like a woman watching her replacement tried to assemble IKEA furniture with a spoon. At 9:16, first Slack ping hit her screen. "Hey Mara, auditors asking about vendor dispute resolution flow. Can you hop in?" She didn't answer. Mara arrived early on audit day, not out of loyalty, but to enjoy the spectacle from a front row seat, sipping her iced coffee like champagne. She wore a navy blue blouse, subtle makeup, and the detached smile of someone attending an ex's wedding. Just to confirm, the bride looks nervous. By 8:47 a.m., the auditors arrived, a 3-person team from a third-party compliance firm with clipboards, stern expressions, and the emotional range of tax law. One of them even had a suitcase that opened like a rifle case, revealing laptops, flash drives, and checklists. The CFO came down in a rush, sweating through his collar. "Let's make this smooth and efficient," he barked. "Everyone be responsive, be clear, and let's put our best foot forward." Trent nodded like a bobblehead. "We've got this," he said. They did not have it. Within the first 15 minutes, the auditors found 3 missing vendor confirmations, a duplicated purchase order, and an account labeled MISKEXP. From her desk, Mara watched it all unfold like a woman watching her replacement try to assemble IKEA furniture with a spoon. At 9:16, the first Slack message arrived. "Hey Mara, auditors are asking about vendor dispute resolution flow. Can you hop in?" She didn't reply. 923 Mara. "They want to see how we closed the Q3GL variance." "Was that in the binder you reviewed, W. Greg?" "Nope." 931. Need confirm. MBB. ASAP. CFOs asking. She closed Slack. Then she opened her resignation confirmation email, read it twice, sipped her coffee, smiled. At 9:42, Cynthia from HR. Poor frantic. Cynthia showed up at her desk looking like she'd just been hit by a compliance bus. Mara, could you please step into the conference room? They're asking questions only you can answer. Mara powered down her screen with deliberate calm. Oh, I'm afraid I clocked out 10 minutes ago, but it's still morning. My final day ends at 9:30 a.m. sharp as agreed, she said, standing and sliding her company badge across the desk like a poker chip. Anything after that, voluntary. Cynthia blinked. The auditors will need to work with the team, Mara said, stepping into her coat. I've done my part. Down the hallway, she could already hear the CFO raising his voice. Something about how the hell does no one know where the 940 templates are, followed by the satisfying sound of Greg attempting to explain a pivot table using interpretive grunts and hope. Mara passed the glass conference room just as an auditor, gestured at the screen and said, "This entry is dated February 31st. That's not a real date." She didn't break stride. By the time the auditor flagged their third undocumented variance, the CFO shouted her name down the hall. Mara, we need you in here now. She paused by the elevator and slightly, I'm afraid that's above my pay grade now, she said, not unkindly. And then she was gone. Elevator down, phone off. A breath she didn't know she'd been holding released like steam from a cracked pipe. The world outside had never looked so free. At 9:23, another message arrived. Mara, they want to see how we closed a Q3 GL variance. Was that in the binder you reviewed with Greg? At 9:31, need you in the conference room ASAP. The CFO is asking. She closed Slack, then opened her resignation confirmation email. She read it twice, sipped her coffee, and smiled. At 9:42, Cynthia from HR appeared looking frantic. Mara, she said, could you please come to the conference room? They're asking questions only you can answer. Mara deliberately powered down her screen. Oh, I'm afraid I clocked out 10 minutes ago, she said. But it's still morning, Cynthia replied. My last day ends at 9:30 a.m. sharp. As agreed, Mara said, standing and sliding her company badge across the desk like a poker chip. Anything after that is voluntary. Cynthia blinked. The auditors will need to work with the team, she said. As Mara put on her coat, she said, I've done my part. Down the hallway, she could hear the CFO raising his voice about how no one knew where the 940 templates were, followed by the sound of Greg trying to explain a pivot table with grunts and hopeful gestures. As Mara passed the glass conference room, she saw an auditor point at a screen and say, This entry is dated February 31st? That's not a real date? She didn't stop. By the time the auditor flagged their third undocumented variance, the CFO was shouting her name down the hall. Mara, we need you in here now. She paused by the elevator. I'm afraid that's above my pay grade now, she said, not unkindly. And then she was gone. The elevator went down, her phone was off, and she released a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. The world outside had never felt so free. Back upstairs, the company was officially being flagged for operational negligence. Several controls were deemed non-verifiable. Vendor audit trails were marked unsubstantiated. And Trent, man who once used synergy to justify gutting her department, was now flipping through 3-month-old spreadsheets while explaining, "This used to work when Marla was here." But Mara was already in her car, windows down, wind in her hair, listening to Sinatra, and humming along like the final credits of a very long, very sweet revenge movie. Upstairs, the company was officially being flagged for operational negligence. Several controls were found to be unverifiable, and vendor audit trails were marked as unsubstantiated, and Trent, the man who had used the word synergy to justify eliminating her department, was now flipping through 3-month-old spreadsheets and explaining that this used to work when Mara was here. But Mara was already in her car with the windows down and the wind in her hair, listening to Sinatra and humming along as if she were in the final scene of a long, satisfying revenge movie. The audit report dropped like a guillotine. Whispers turned to murmurs turned to boardroom screams. By the end of the week, the entire 5th floor smelled like scorched reputation. 3 days after Mara's departure, the firm's executive Slack lit up like a slot machine on fire. Words like breach, non-compliant, and how the hell did we miss this ricocheted off digital walls? The final report labeled their reconciliation procedures structurally deficient, noted severe gaps in documentation, and with the cold finality of a coroner's signature, recommended an immediate freeze on all external growth initiatives. The audit report fell like a guillotine. Quiet whispers turned into loud murmurs, and murmurs turned into shouting in the boardroom. By the end of the week, the entire 5th floor smelled like a scorched reputation. 3 days after Mara left, the firm's executive Slack channel exploded with messages, words like breach, non-compliant, and how did we miss this ricocheted across digital screens? The final report called their reconciliation procedures structurally deficient, noted severe gaps in documentation, and, with the cold finality of a coroner's signature, recommended an immediate halt on all external growth plans. Translation: expansion plans were dead. The CFO, under internal review rumor, was the board found an old email chain where he told Mara to just fudge the variance this once. That alone could bury him under enough HR tape to mummify a C-suite. And Trent was quietly reassigned to business development strategy support, a title so vague it might as well have been benchwarmer. His new desk was reportedly located next to the printer. People said he flinched every time someone printed a reconciliation report. None of this surprised Mara. She was already 3 days into her new job. Her new office had real windows. Her new team actually listened when she spoke. The first meeting she attended, the director said, "We trust your judgment. Build whatever process you think is best." She almost cried. Instead, she nodded once, opened her laptop, and set up systems in 6 hours that would have taken her old company 6 months, and for breakdowns. In other words, their expansion plans were dead. The CFO was under internal review. Rumors said the board had found an old email where he told Mara to just fudge the variance this once, an email that could bury him under enough HR investigations to mummify an executive. And Trent was quietly reassigned to business development strategy support. A title so vague it might as well have been benchwarmer. His new desk was reportedly next to the printer, and people said he flinched every time a reconciliation report was printed. None of this surprised Mara. She was already 3 days into her new job. Her new office had real windows. Her new team actually listened to her. In her first meeting, the director said, "We trust your judgment. Build whatever process you think is best." She almost cried. Instead, she simply nodded, opened her laptop, and set up systems in 6 hours that would have taken her old company 6 months and 4 meltdowns. On Wednesday, they delivered her welcome package, personalized mug company fleece, a card signed by her entire department. One note read, "Finally, someone who knows what she's doing." By Thursday, the CEO swung by her desk just to say he'd heard great things already. She didn't blush, didn't stammer, just smiled and said, "Plenty more, too. Come." That was that. The chap was closed. No leftover bitterness, no night sweats, just a clean, quiet satisfaction until Friday. She was eating lunch, turkey wrap, kettle chips, sparkling water when the notification popped up. LinkedIn Trent B has requested to connect. She stared at it for a full 20 seconds. Fork suspended. His profile banner still showed him grinning in front of a chart with arrows going up. Message: would love to stay in touch. Hope you're doing well. Smiling face with smiling eyes. She clicked ignore, paused, hovered over the ellipsis, then clicked block. No message, no comment, just a clean digital severing. Smoother than any exit interview, sharper than any resignation letter, because some bridges deserve to burn, and in their light, you finally see the road ahead. On Wednesday, she received her welcome package, which included a personalized mug, a company fleece, and a card signed by her entire team. One note read, "Finally, someone who knows what she's doing." By Thursday, the CEO stopped by her desk to say he had already heard great things about her. She didn't blush or stammer. She just smiled and said, "There's plenty more to come." And with that, the chapter was closed. She felt no leftover bitterness, no night sweats, just a clean, quiet satisfaction until Friday. She was eating her lunch when a notification popped up. LinkedIn. Trent B has requested to connect. She stated it for 20 seconds. Her fork suspended in midair. His profile banner showed him grinning in front of a chart with upward pointing arrows. The message read, "Would love to stay in touch. Hope you're doing well." Smiling face emoji. She clicked ignore, paused, hovered over the 3 dots, and then clicked block. There was no message, no comment, just a clean digital severing. Smoother than any exit interview and sharper than any resignation letter, because some bridges deserve to burn, and in their light, you can finally see the road ahead. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories. You are the true stars of the corporate world. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe or I'll start bringing up your old cubicle memories. Translation: expansion plans were dead. The CFO under internal review. Rumor was the board found an old email chain where he told Mara to just fudge the variance this once. That alone could bury him under enough HR tape to mummify a C-suite. And Trent was quietly reassigned to business development strategy support, a title so vague it might as well have been benchwarmer. His new desk was reportedly located next to the printer. People said he flinched every time someone printed a reconciliation report. None of this surprised Mara. She was already 3 days into her new job. Her new office had real windows. Her new team actually listened when she spoke. The first meeting she attended, the director said, "We trust your judgment. Build whatever process you think is best." She almost cried. Instead, she nodded once, opened her laptop, and set up systems in 6 hours that would have taken her old company 6 months, and for breakdowns. In other words, their expansion plans were dead. The CFO was under internal review. Rumors said the board had found an old email where he told Mara to just fudge the variance this once, an email that could bury him under enough HR investigations to mummify an executive. And Trent was quietly reassigned to business development strategy support, a title so vague it might as well have been benchwarmer. His new desk was reportedly next to the printer, and people said he flinched every time a reconciliation report was printed. None of this surprised Mara. She was already 3 days into her new job. Her new office had real windows. Her new team actually listened to her. In her first meeting, the director said, "We trust your judgment. Build whatever process you think is best." She almost cried. Instead, she simply nodded, opened her laptop, and set up systems in 6 hours that would have taken her old company 6 months and 4 meltdowns. On Wednesday, they delivered her welcome package, personalized mug company fleece, a card signed by her entire department. One note read, "Finally, someone who knows what she's doing." By Thursday, the CEO swung by her desk just to say he'd heard great things already. She didn't blush, didn't stammer, just smiled and said, "Plenty more, too. Come." That was that. The chap was closed. No leftover bitterness, no night sweats, just a clean, quiet satisfaction until Friday. She was eating lunch, turkey wrap, kettle chips, sparkling water when the notification popped up. LinkedIn Trent B has requested to connect. She stared at it for a full 20 seconds, fork suspended. His profile banner still showed him grinning in front of a chart with arrows going up. Message: would love to stay in touch. Hope you're doing well. Smiling face with smiling eyes. She clicked ignore, paused, hovered over the ellipsis, then clicked block. No message, no comment, just a clean digital severing. Smoother than any exit interview, sharper than any resignation letter, because some bridges deserve to burn, and in their light, you finally see the road ahead. On Wednesday, she received her welcome package, which included a personalized mug, a company fleece, and a card signed by her entire team. One note read, "Finally, someone who knows what she's doing." By Thursday, the CEO stopped by her desk to say he had already heard great things about her. She didn't blush or stammer. She just smiled and said, "There's plenty more to come." And with that, the chapter was closed. She felt no leftover bitterness, no night sweats, just a clean, quiet satisfaction until Friday. She was eating her lunch when a notification popped up. LinkedIn. Trent B. has requested to connect. She stated it for 20 seconds. Her fork suspended in midair. His profile banner showed him grinning in front of a chart with upward pointing arrows. The message read, "Would love to stay in touch. Hope you're doing well." Smiling face emoji. She clicked ignore, paused, hovered over the 3 dots, and then clicked block. There was no message, no comment, just a clean digital severing. Smoother than any exit interview and sharper than any resignation letter, because some bridges deserve to burn, and in their light, you can finally see the road ahead. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories. You are the true stars of the corporate world. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe or I'll start bringing up your old cubicle memories.